My name is Evelyn Mercer, and the night my husband told me to leave our home, he believed he was throwing away a dependent wife. He had no idea he was ordering the legal owner of his entire business empire to walk out the door, 21 minutes after he said, "Accept it or leave." Every joint account we shared had been frozen. 34 minutes later, the board of Mercer Vale Holdings received notice that my controlling shares had been withdrawn from the corporate structure. Before midnight, nearly $900 million in ownership had shifted beyond his reach. By then, my phone was vibrating nonstop on the passenger seat. One missed call became 9. 9 became 27. By the time I reached the hotel, there were 63. I answered none of them. Less than an hour earlier, I had watched my husband kiss another woman inside my late mother's library. The woman was not a stranger. She was my cousin, my childhood confidant, and the person I had trusted to organize my daughter's second birthday party. That evening began beneath strings of white lights in the gardens of our estate outside Boston. Nearly 70 guests filled the lawn, relatives, neighbors, executives, investors, and children running between flower beds with balloons tied around their wrists. My daughter, Lily, wore a pale yellow dress and a paper crown that kept slipping over one eye. She laughed every time I fixed it. It should have been one of the happiest evenings of my life. Our house had belonged to my family for 3 generations. My grandfather bought the property when Mercer Vale was only a small shipping company with 8 trucks and 1 warehouse near the harbor. My mother later expanded it into logistics, commercial property, and renewable energy investments. When she died 5 years earlier, she left me 64% of the company through a private family trust. The public never knew. My husband, Nathan Vale, became the face of the business. He gave interviews, attended conferences, and appeared on magazine covers. He was charming, polished, and confident in front of cameras. I preferred financial reports, board meetings, and long-term planning. Eventually, people began calling it Nathan's company. I never corrected them. At the time, recognition seemed unimportant. I believed marriage meant sharing success without keeping score. I did not understand that silence can sometimes teach the wrong person that everything belongs to him. Nathan and I had been married for 11 years. We met at a university fundraiser, where he spent most of the evening making fun of the terrible food and persuading me to dance, even though there was no dance floor. He had once been thoughtful. He remembered anniversaries, brought coffee to my office, and called my mother every Sunday. Then the company grew, so did his pride. Over the previous year, he had become impatient with me. He dismissed my questions during meetings and criticized me for being too cautious. He spent more nights in New York, claiming acquisitions required his attention. Whenever I felt uneasy, I gave him another explanation. He was tired. He was under pressure. Marriage changed after children. Love makes people generous with excuses. My cousin, Vanessa, arrived early to help with the party. She hugged me, kissed Lily, and took charge of everything from the cake table to the musicians. "You need to relax," she told me. "Today is about your little girl." Vanessa and I had grown up almost like sisters. After her parents divorced, she spent every school holiday at our house. My mother paid part of her university tuition. I stood beside her at her wedding, and she stood beside me at mine. When her marriage ended, I gave her a senior communications position at Mercer Vale. I never imagined I had also given her access to my husband. As sunset turned the sky pink, everyone gathered around Lily's birthday cake. It was decorated with sugar flowers and 2 small candles. The guests began singing. Lily clapped wildly, delighted that everyone was looking at her. I leaned down to help her blow out the candles. That was when I noticed Nathan was missing. At first, I assumed he had taken a business call. Then I realized Vanessa was gone too. A quiet uneasiness moved through me. I handed Lily to my aunt and slipped inside. The cheerful noise from the garden faded as I crossed the hallway. The kitchen was empty. So was Nathan's office. Then I heard laughter from the library, Vanessa's laughter. The door was almost closed. I should have walked away. Part of me wanted to return to the garden and pretend I had heard nothing. Instead, I stepped closer and looked through the narrow opening. Nathan stood beside my mother's desk with one hand around Vanessa's waist. Her fingers rested against his neck. They kissed slowly, comfortably, not like 2 people making a sudden mistake, like 2 people following a familiar routine. For several seconds, I could not breathe. I noticed absurd details. Nathan's watch reflecting the light, Vanessa's red lipstick, the silver-framed photograph of my mother behind them. They were betraying me beneath her photograph. Outside, The guests applauded as Lily blew out her candles. I quietly stepped away. I did not confront them immediately. I returned to the garden, lifted my daughter into my arms, and smiled for photographs. I thanked guests for their gifts. I cut cake. I listened while Nathan's mother told everyone how much Lily resembled him. No one noticed that my marriage had ended during the birthday song. The final guests left shortly after 9. Vanessa disappeared without saying goodbye. Nathan stood in the kitchen pouring whiskey when I approached him. "We need to talk." He sighed without looking at me. "Can it wait until morning?" "I saw you with Vanessa." His hand stopped above the glass. He did not apologize. He did not deny it. Instead, he took a slow drink and said, "Come upstairs." Inside our bedroom, he locked the door and turned toward me with an expression colder than anything I had ever seen. "How long?" I asked. "That doesn't matter. She is my family. She understands me." I stared at him. He continued calmly, as though discussing a contract. "This marriage hasn't worked for a long time, Evelyn. Vanessa doesn't criticize every decision. She supports me. You kissed her during your daughter's birthday." He shrugged. "It wasn't planned." "In my mother's library." His face hardened. "I'm not going to spend the rest of my life apologizing for wanting to be happy." I waited for shame. There was none. Then he spoke the sentence that revealed exactly what he believed about me. "You won't leave. You need this life too much. The house, the money, the company." He thought they were his. He thought I was simply fortunate enough to live beside him. Nathan pointed toward the door. "Accept it or leave." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I nodded. "All right." His expression briefly changed. He had expected tears, arguments, perhaps begging. Instead, I walked into Lily's room. She was asleep in her crib, still wearing her yellow birthday dress. I lifted her carefully, wrapped her in a blanket, and packed one overnight bag. I took no jewelry, no artwork, no financial records. The documents that mattered are already stored electronically under my authority. Nathan remained upstairs. He never imagined I would actually go. As I drove through the estate gates, Lily slept peacefully in the back seat. I looked at her through the mirror and whispered, "I'm here, sweetheart." Then I reached for my phone and called the attorney who had managed my mother's trust for nearly 20 years. "Evelyn," he answered. "What happened?" "I've left Nathan." A long silence followed. Then he asked, "Do you want me to activate the emergency provisions?" I looked once at the mansion disappearing behind me. "Yes," I said. "Activate everything." That was the first moment Nathan Vale's empire began to collapse. The hotel overlooked Boston Harbor. It was quiet, anonymous, and exactly what I needed. Lily never woke as I carried her upstairs. The receptionist helped set up a portable crib while quietly wishing us a peaceful night. She had no idea that my marriage had ended less than an hour earlier. After laying Lily down, I stood beside the window watching the harbor lights shimmer across the water. For several minutes, I allowed myself to breathe. Not cry. Just breathe. My mother always believed emotions deserved respect, but decisions required discipline. Never make permanent choices inside temporary feelings. She often told me, tonight I intended to follow her advice. I opened the leather portfolio that never left my side. Most people assumed it contained meeting notes. Instead, it held certified copies of the Mercer Family Trust, emergency shareholder authorizations, and corporate governance agreements. Documents almost no one besides our attorneys had ever seen. I called Benjamin Rhodes. He had represented my family for over 25 years. "Evelyn," he answered immediately. "I was hoping you'd never have to use this number. I need every emergency clause activated." "You've made your decision?" "I have." His voice became professional. "I'll contact the legal team immediately. Within 30 minutes, the banking instructions, trust provisions, and shareholder notifications will begin. No delays. There won't be." He paused. "Are you safe?" "Yes. And Lily? Sleeping?" "Good. I'll take care of the rest." The line disconnected. My next call went to Helen Brooks, the private banker who had worked with my grandfather before I was even born. She answered despite the late hour. "Evelyn, I need every joint account frozen tonight." There was only a brief silence. "I expected this call might come one day." "You did? Your mother prepared for possibilities, not hopes." I smiled sadly. "She certainly did. The paperwork gives you full authority. I'll process everything immediately." "I appreciate it. It may cause a serious reaction." "I know." Within minutes, she confirmed the instructions had been executed. Nathan would discover it the first time he tried to move money. The third call mattered more than the others. I dialed Grace Whitmore, Mercer Vale's corporate secretary. Few people understood how much authority rested inside her office. Every shareholder resolution, every ownership agreement, every emergency governance procedure. She answered after only 2 rings. Evelyn, I need Protocol 7. The silence lasted several seconds. Are you certain? Completely. That procedure has never been activated. I know. It will notify every director before sunrise. I understand. It also suspends all executive authority connected to contested ownership. I understand that too. Grace inhaled slowly. I'll begin immediately. When she ended the call, there was no turning back. I stepped onto the balcony. The night air carried the smell of salt water. Everything around me looked calm. Only a handful of people knew that one of the country's largest private corporations was about to wake up to complete uncertainty. Another number, David Chen. Our chief financial officer. He answered before the second ring. I've already received automated alerts. They're real. What happened, Nathan? He didn't ask for details. Instead, he quietly said, "What do you need from me?" I appreciated him for that. I need payroll protected. He sounded surprised. Payroll? No employee should suffer because my marriage failed. David remained silent for several moments. We've over 4,000 employees. I know every one of them depends on those salaries. You've already thought farther ahead than everyone else. No, I looked toward Lily sleeping peacefully. I simply know who isn't responsible. His voice softened. Your mother would be proud. I hope so. Before ending the call, he added, I'll make sure operations continue exactly as planned. Thank you. At exactly 10:41 p.m., Helen called back. The joint accounts are frozen. So quickly? Nathan attempted 3 transactions while we were processing. I closed my eyes. He already knows. Apparently. 1 minute later, Benjamin sent confirmation. Every legal filing had been accepted. Then Grace Preplock 7 officially entered into corporate records. Everything my family had prepared decades earlier had become reality in less than 40 minutes. Only one authorization remained. I opened the secure shareholder portal on my phone. Dived across the screen were the words, primary ownership, 64%. Estimated value, 912 million thousand. Nathan believed those shares belonged to him. In truth, he had never owned a single one. Before our wedding, every attorney insisted on strict legal separation between inherited ownership and marital assets. Nathan signed every document. He simply never bothered reading them. I rested my thumb over the final authorization. This wasn't revenge. The company wasn't being destroyed. Its ownership was simply returning to the protected structure my mother created years before her death. I pressed confirm. The screen displayed one word, Geklopet. Almost immediately, my phone exploded. Nathan ignored, Nathan again, ignored Admornal number. Ignored Vanessa. Ignored Bird Chairman, ignored Chief Operating Officer, ignored. Within 12 minutes, I had 71 missed calls. Voicemail notifications appeared faster than I could read them. Finally, curiosity won. I played only the first message. Evelyn, answer your phone. The bank says our accounts are frozen. The second message arrived less than 2 minutes later. What did you do? The third. The board is calling me. The fourth, please answer. His confidence was disappearing. By the 10th voicemail, panic had replaced arrogance. I switched my phone to silent. For years, Nathan enjoyed standing beneath cameras while reporters described Mercer Vale as his achievement. He accepted every compliment. He never corrected anyone. Neither did I. Recognition never interested me. Peace did. But peace cannot survive where respect has disappeared. Around midnight, another call came from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered, Nathan. You've made your point. My point? Reverse whatever you've done. I don't think you understand what's happening. The banks won't release anything. They won't. The board says emergency governance has been activated. That's correct. Evelyn. His voice cracked. You can't destroy everything. I remained calm. I'm not destroying my family's company. A long silence followed. I'm protecting it. He whispered, please. I looked toward Lily. She had rolled onto her side, hugging the little stuffed rabbit my mother bought before she was born for her, for my family, for every employee whose future depended on wise decisions. I had no intention of changing course. I hope someday, I said quietly, you understand the difference. Then I ended the call. Outside, the harbor lights reflected across the water. Inside the room, the phone finally became silent. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't realized I had lost. Control over my own life. The following morning, Nathan Vale would wake believing he could fix everything with another conversation. Instead, he would discover that the woman he thought depended on him had been protecting him all along. And now, she no longer needed to. The next morning began with sunshine. For Lily, it was simply another beautiful day. She woke smiling, stretched both little arms toward me, and proudly held up her stuffed rabbit as if introducing it to the world all over again. Children have a remarkable gift. They believe every morning is a fresh beginning. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Good morning, sweetheart." She laughed. It was the first genuine smile I had managed since leaving home. Downstairs, the hotel restaurant was nearly empty. An elderly couple sat beside the windows, sharing breakfast while reading the newspaper. Lily happily dropped pieces of banana onto the floor. The older woman laughed. "I think she's having the best breakfast here." "I believe she agrees," I replied. For 10 peaceful minutes, life almost felt ordinary. Then my phone vibrated again. This time it was David Chen. His voice sounded exhausted. "The markets haven't opened yet, but word has already spread." "How bad?" "3 investment partners have postponed negotiations." I expected that. "The board held an emergency conference call at 6 this morning. And Nathan? He insisted everything was under control." I almost smiled. Did anyone believe him? No. David paused before continuing. "They've finally reviewed the shareholder records." I already knew what that meant. They know. Every director now knows Mercer Vale has always belonged to your family. For years, those same directors had congratulated Nathan after every successful acquisition. Many had never realized I chaired governance meetings quietly behind the scenes. Public attention had blinded them to the legal structure sitting in front of them. "What about the employees?" I asked. "They're frightened." "Not angry?" "No." "Good." David sounded surprised. "You expected anger?" "I expected uncertainty. We've already informed every department that payroll remains fully protected." A deep weight lifted from my chest. No layoffs? The factories operating normally, the logistics division still moving freight, the renewable energy projects continuing without interruption. Exactly what I wanted. Companies survive difficult headlines. Families living paycheck to paycheck often do not. Before ending the call, David quietly said, "You've protected thousands of people who will never know your name. I don't need them to. But they deserve to know someone protected them." I looked at Lily coloring with a crayon beside the window, knowing they're safe is enough. That afternoon, I checked out of the hotel. I didn't return to the mansion. Instead, I drove nearly 3 hours north to the only place that had ever truly felt like home, my grandmother's lakeside cottage. It rested beside Crystal Lake in western Massachusetts, surrounded by tall pine trees and wildflowers. The house was modest. Weathered blue shutters, a wooden porch, an old swing hanging beneath a maple tree. After my mother died, I couldn't bear selling it. Now I finally understood why. The moment I unlocked the front door, memories greeted me. Fresh bread cooling on the kitchen counter, rainy afternoons playing cards, my grandmother teaching me how to bake blackberry pies. Success had built our corporate headquarters. Love had built this house. Lily immediately ran toward the porch, laughing at the ducks swimming across the lake. "Water." "Yes," I smiled. "So much water." For the first time in many months, I felt safe. 3 days passed quietly. I cooked simple meals, walked with Lily around the lake, ignored nearly every media request arriving on my phone. Television reporters camped outside the Boston estate. Financial analysts debated whether Mercer Vale would survive. Some praised me, others criticized me. Neither opinion mattered. They didn't know the truth. I wasn't fighting for money. I was protecting my daughter from growing up inside a lie. On the 4th afternoon, someone knocked on the cottage door. I already knew who it was. Vanessa. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had organized Lily's birthday. Her makeup barely covered sleepless nights. She removed her sunglasses slowly. "Please." I folded my arms. "What do you want? Can we talk?" "There isn't much left to say." "There is." Against my better judgment, I stepped outside and quietly closed the door behind me. Lily remained inside watching cartoons. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears almost immediately. "I never wanted this." I looked at her calmly. "You never wanted to get caught." She flinched. "It wasn't supposed to happen." "No affair ever is." She lowered her head. "It just no," I interrupted gently. "It didn't just happen." Silence. I opened my handbag and removed a thin folder. She frowned. "What's that?" I handed it to her. Hotel invoices, private flight manifests, restaurant reservations, corporate expense reports, bond records. Each page documented meetings spanning almost 22 months. Her hands began shaking. "How?" "I oversee internal compliance." She stared at the documents. You investigated me? No, I investigated unexplained executive expenses. She slowly looked up. You knew? I hoped I was wrong. More tears rolled down her face. Nathan told me you never noticed anything. I noticed everything. Then why didn't you stop us? Because love makes people search for innocent explanations. I had spent months convincing myself every suspicious receipt, every unexplained trip, every canceled family dinner must have another reason. I wanted to believe my husband. Instead, the truth had been quietly collecting itself inside accounting reports. Vanessa covered her mouth. I'm sorry. I believed she regretted the consequences. I wasn't certain she regretted the betrayal. There is a difference. What happens now? She whispered. You go home, and us, there hasn't been an us since the day you chose my husband. She nodded slowly. Without another word, she returned to her car. I watched her drive away through the trees. It was the last time I ever saw her. That evening, David called again. The board met in person today. How did it go? He laughed tiredly. Worse than anyone expected. Nathan, he kept insisting, you'll come back. I looked across the quiet lake. He still doesn't understand. No, David became serious. They've requested an extraordinary shareholder meeting. When? Friday morning. I'll be there. The directors want answers. They'll get them. He hesitated. Evelyn, yes? There's something else. What is it? The directors aren't asking who owns the company anymore. What are they asking? David took a slow breath. They're asking how they spent years believing the wrong person was leading it. I looked toward the fading sunset reflecting across the lake. The answer was simple, because I never cared who received the applause. Now, silence had finally become too expensive. On Friday morning, I would walk into Mercer Vale's boardroom not as Nathan Vale's wife, but as the woman whose signature determined the future of an empire. And for the first time, everyone in that room would finally know exactly who I was. Friday morning arrived with clear skies. The headquarters of Mercer Vale stood exactly as it always had. Glass walls reflecting the Boston skyline, employees walking through the revolving doors with coffee in their hands, receptionists greeting visitors with practiced smiles. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. I arrived 10 minutes before the extraordinary shareholder meeting. Conversations stopped the moment I entered the executive floor. Some directors nodded respectfully. Others looked embarrassed. Several couldn't meet my eyes. For years, they had congratulated Nathan for decisions I had quietly approved through governance committees and shareholder resolutions. Now they finally understood the truth. Board Chairman Richard Collins stood as I entered. Evelyn, before we begin, I owe you an apology. For what? For allowing public perception to replace proper corporate governance. I smiled politely. My grandmother used to say that people stop seeing the truth when they become too comfortable with appearances. He nodded. We certainly did. The meeting lasted nearly 5 hours. Auditors presented financial reports. Independent legal counsel confirmed every emergency action had been executed according to the Mercer Family Trust. Outside advisors verified that the company remained financially healthy. The crisis had never been cash. It had been confidence. Every division continued operating. Every employee had been paid. Every client contract remained active. The only instability came from leadership. Nathan sat quietly at the opposite end of the table. For the first time since I had met him, he looked uncertain. Not because he had lost money, because he had lost certainty. When the legal presentation ended, Richard addressed him. Nathan, would you like to speak? He stood slowly. For several moments, he simply looked around the room. Then he lowered his eyes. I spent years believing Mercer Vale succeeded because of me. No one interrupted. I accepted recognition that belonged to others. Another pause. I confused authority with ownership. Silence filled the room. I betrayed my wife. His voice became softer. I betrayed the trust of this board. He looked toward me. And I betrayed the family that welcomed me when I had nothing. No excuses, no blaming pressure, no blaming success, just truth. I resigned from every executive position effective immediately. He placed his signed resignation on the conference table. Nobody applauded. Nobody celebrated. There was only quiet acceptance. Sometimes consequences require no dramatic speeches, only honesty. The board voted unanimously to appoint an experienced outside executive as interim chief executive officer. David Chen would remain chief financial officer. I accepted the position of executive chair, focusing only on governance and long-term strategy. Day-to-day operations would belong to professionals chosen for their experience, not family relationships. Exactly as my grandmother always intended. As the meeting ended, directors approached one after another. Some apologized, others thanked me for protecting the employees. One elderly director stopped beside me. "Your grandmother would be proud." I smiled. "I hope I earned that." The divorce moved quietly through the courts over the following months. Neither Nathan nor I allowed reporters inside. There were no television interviews, no public accusations, no ugly legal battles. Our daughter deserved better than headlines. The settlement reflected the years we had shared. Nathan left financially secure, though nowhere near as wealthy as before. Several friends questioned my decision. After everything he did, one of them said, "Why didn't you leave him with nothing?" Because justice and revenge are not the same. I wanted Lily to grow up remembering that her parents behaved like adults even after they stopped being husband and wife. That mattered more than winning. Hongarambury, life at the lakeside cottage slowly became our new normal. Mornings were filled with pancakes, ducks, and walks along the shoreline. Evenings ended with bedtime stories and hot chocolate on the porch during autumn. The mansion no longer felt like home. This little cottage did. Lily never asked why we had moved. Children care more about who tucks them into bed than how large the house is. Nathan requested shared parenting. At first, I hesitated. Trust cannot be rebuilt by promises, only by consistency. He arrived exactly on time for every visit. He attended every doctor's appointment, every school activity, every birthday, every holiday. No expensive presents, no attempts to impress anyone. Just time. Real time, one Saturday he brought Lily a small wooden dollhouse. "I built it myself," he said. "The paint wasn't perfect." One tiny window leaned slightly sideways. Lily hugged it as though it were priceless. Watching them together, I realized something. People can fail spectacularly. Sometimes they can also choose to become better. Not everyone does, but some do. Nearly 2 years later, Mercer Vale celebrated its 50th anniversary. Employees gathered inside the headquarters auditorium. Instead of discussing profits, I spoke about responsibility. "Our greatest asset has never been our buildings," I told them. "It has never been our investments. It has always been trust." The room remained silent. Money creates opportunities. Character determines what we do with them. After the speech, a warehouse supervisor approached me. "I've worked here 26 years. I smiled. "Thank you." He shook his head. "No." His eyes became emotional. "Thank you for protecting our jobs when everything was falling apart." I looked around the auditorium. Hundreds of families depended on Mercer Vale. Saving the company had never been about preserving wealth. It had been about protecting people. That evening, Lily and I returned to the cottage. She ran ahead toward the porch, carrying wildflowers she had picked beside the lake. "Mama, look! They're beautiful!" She handed me the tiny bouquet. I picked the prettiest ones. I hugged her tightly. Years earlier, I believed success meant building the largest company. Now I understood success differently. Success meant my daughter laughed without fear. Success meant sleeping peacefully. Success meant never needing revenge to feel whole. As the sun disappeared behind the lake, I remembered the woman driving away from the mansion with only one overnight bag and a sleeping little girl in the back seat. She thought she had lost everything. She hadn't. She had carried away the only things that truly mattered: her dignity, her child, her values. The rest could always be rebuilt. Life has a strange way of revealing people exactly as they are. Some become smaller when given power, others become stronger after losing everything they thought they needed. Nathan lost a company but eventually rediscovered integrity. Vanessa lost every relationship she tried to build through deception. The board learned that leadership without accountability eventually collapses, and I learned the lesson my grandmother had quietly lived every day of her life. Real strength is not measured by how completely you defeat the person who hurt you. It is measured by whether you can protect what is good without becoming what wounded you. Whenever Lily grows old enough to ask why our family changed, I won't fill her heart with anger. I'll simply tell her this: people sometimes make painful choices. You cannot control their actions, but you can always control your own. Choose honesty, choose dignity, and never mistake silence for weakness. Because in the end, the greatest inheritance a parent leaves a child is not wealth, property, or a successful company. It is the example they set when life gives them every reason to become bitter. And they choose wisdom instead. That was the legacy I wanted my daughter to inherit. And unlike any fortune recorded on a balance sheet, no one could ever take it away.